Change is inevitable, growth is optional. We laser in on change because everyone else is doing it. But the growth piece is optional. That's really where the curiosity needs to be.
I always have this visualization. It's like everybody's sitting in suits of armour around the table, ready for the arrows. They're all guarded. And especially as you get to the top of organisations, they've added more and more armour in order to get to the top. And it's a rare individual, and you can spot it a mile off, the individual that suddenly takes their armour off and becomes the real human again.
Yeah, we're in a solution world where human beings fight or flight, see a problem, solve it, see a problem, solve it. Nothing has changed. There are no solutions, just trade-offs.
We never think of them as trade-offs. And I think it's partly down to the way humans are wired. You know, we tend to be very binary. We love black and white, but we hate that grey, messy middle stuff.
We believe we have to add, when actually we get more from taking things away.
I guess what you're doing is encouraging people, let's say, to pedal in the opposite direction. Is that fair?
Absolutely. We walk out going, that was a great meeting, and then suddenly afterwards we say, I didn't get anything from it. When was the last time you come out of a meeting and said, I really felt like I was listened to in that meeting? And that's sort of the work I do, is how do you give people the space in a meeting to be able to ask the questions without feeling they're going to be shouted upon or pushed down. And I've now seen lots of people who struggle to let their curiosity come into the meeting room.
So imagine for a moment this project that everybody's excited about that we're going to deliver, and it's going live in August, and it's failed. Great to have you here, Paul.
Pleasure.
So let's start with, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to, what you are up to.
Well, very quickly, my background started a long, long time ago, and I ended up in the tech sector. And I spent over many, many years in the tech sector. And where I am right now is a business coach and mentor to a number of people. And I know you're going to probably want to know, was there a seminal moments in my career? And there's probably many, but I think you probably want me to talk about one.
We will come to that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's have a just quick chat about how you help your clients, the people you work with. What do you do for them?
My background originally was technology, and then my moments, which we're going to talk about, turned me into more of a human-centered thinker. Sounds a bit fluffy, but actually a lot of people want the fluff. They want to make sure that for the human being in their organisation, they're getting the most out of what they do. And so I flipped into that world. So I spend most of my time helping people in human-centered ways, like problem solving, communication, collaboration, but in a way that I think is good enough for them. I don't promise too much. I've been around a bit. I've seen lots of things promise a lot and not deliver. So I try and focus on what's good enough for them and the questions they should ask each other, or more importantly, the questions they thought they'd asked, but they hadn't got the answers that they needed. And that's really what I do. And I'm deliberately a bit vague, but that suits me right now in my life and what I want to try and do.
Yeah. And does that, if I take that a little bit further, does that mean you are essentially encouraging them to go a little deeper?
Yes.
To ask the deeper questions?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a wonderful book called The Beautiful Question. And in the business world, there's often, depending on the sector you're in, not a lot of wriggle room for beautiful questions. You work in industry and engineering, manufacturing, who cares about beautiful questions? I just want to know, have you hit the output? Have you produced what you said you're going to do? But there's still room, I think, for a beautiful question. What is a beautiful question? It's a question that triggers things like, how does that make you feel? What do you think about that? And the core of my skill set, I suppose, is what I learned when I was at IBM, which was design thinking, that human-centered philosophy about understanding problems, reframing again, until eventually you realize the problem you're solving is the one you need to solve, as opposed to the problem that everyone tells you should be solving and it's the wrong one.
And then my brain instantly goes to the boardrooms that I'm sure you've sat in as well. Let's just say that isn't always in evidence. There's a lot of that sense of knowing or hesitating when to speak and what to say next, on the basis of what you say needs to sound good. And I guess what you're doing is encouraging people, let's say, to pedal in the opposite direction. Is that a fair?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mark. I've spent so much, like you have, many times in what I call performative theatre in the business world, where you walk in, everything's slick, slides, the coffee, everything. The technology is performative, and so we perform. And we perform because people expect us to perform that way.
That's right.
And any element of vulnerability gets squashed out. And we walk out going, that was a great meeting. And then suddenly afterwards we say, I didn't get anything from it. When was the last time you come out of a meeting and said, I really felt like I was listened to in that meeting? Rarely, I think. And that's sort of the work I do, is how do you give people the space in a meeting to be able to ask the questions without feeling they're going to be shouted upon or pushed down. And that talks about culture, which is massive. You know, if the culture's wrong, it doesn't matter how well you do this, it's going to struggle.
Yeah.
So it's quite a big subject. So I try and not bite too much off the elephant, and just focus on the things that I think I can do to help.
Yeah, yeah. And essentially, it's looking at the outcome side of that equation. To make this kind of relevant, I suppose, is that those kinds of meetings, what typically happens is you do get that sort of polite agreement, don't you? And then it's what follows after is the telling part, the extent to which what was agreed, what was discussed, actually gets followed through, and actually then becomes a change in behaviours, some things that get actioned off the back of it.
I mean, the one thing I really enjoy is like the silent approach, which worries a lot of people. But when you kind of have some silence in the room, where tech is off and people just focus in the moment, staying in the moment, to really open their mind to what they're reading. And in the world of fast-paced technology and everything we do, we don't tend to do that. So we jump to conclusions and all our biases kick in, and it causes us problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, silence is a great tool when used well, for sure. So let's start to sort of zoom in on the moment that we wanted to talk about today. So give us a little bit of context. You know, what was happening at the time? You know, what was it that led into that?
Yeah, so my moment was at one particular event, but it's obviously, for me, it's gone over many, many years and still going, really. But prior to the moment, which was a meeting, which, to your point, I was firmly a technologist. I believed technology was everything. We got used to breaking it, fixing it, breaking it. We didn't really care about outcomes. It was all inputs, outputs. You have a problem, we have a solution, we move on to the next one. That was my world, and it was great fun. I really enjoyed it. It's hard work, but I really enjoyed it. Then we had a moment where we'd won a bid. We'd won. We'd beaten everybody else. We'd won. They'd chosen us. It was perfect. Bells were ringing. Salespeople were happy.
I'm guessing this was a big deal, right?
It was a huge deal for us at the time. And then we met the person that we hadn't thought we'd meet, who was the stakeholder, who said, when he went through everything he was buying from us, bear in mind, they'd chosen us, they had the budget, they had the need, said, even if this was free, I don't want it. And it was incredulous. You know, the incredulity was just enormous in the room from our side, because like, why would he say this? Is this guy crazy? My curiosity gene that I'd dampened down over many, many years suddenly popped up.
I can imagine the reaction. It sounds like a drop the mic moment.
It was a drop the mic moment. Yeah. For everyone else, they walked away. But for me, I was just curious. Why did he say that? Why did he say that? Kept going round and round in my head. Why would he say that?
Yeah.
He's a senior person, you know, very successful. So I went and asked him. And from that point, I suppose my moment directed my career, because I rebooted my curiosity gene. And I've now seen lots of people who struggle to let their curiosity come into the meeting room.
Yeah.
Or they play at it. They'll ask questions like, you know, tell me what good looks like. We all ask that question. We ask the plumber, the decorator. We ask those questions because we expected to ask those questions. And so we answer back in a certain way. Rarely do we go deeper and say, how does that make us feel? Describe what it feels like to do something. We don't want to ask those questions in lots of cases, especially when we're talking about change. Because, you know, there's a quote, John Maxwell, change is inevitable, growth is optional.
Yeah.
Right? And we talk about this a lot, you and I, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Change is inevitable. So we laser in onto change because everyone else is doing it. So we don't need to spend too much time thinking about it.
Yeah.
But the growth piece is optional. That's really where the curiosity needs to be. And I fear we don't have that so much. So that was my moment. I can still remember it. He's a great friend of mine still. I wrote a book on the back of it, as you know, and it sort of set me going.
So just describe, I mean, I can imagine, I'm guessing you weren't the only person in the room.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, so you know, thinking about the energy in the room at the time, you know, obviously you can probably take yourself back there. So what was the reaction around the table? I mean, because I imagine that came out of the blue.
It was totally out of the blue, and you know, we worked with a huge technology partner, a huge big global company, who just kind of walked out and went, "You've wasted our time. You know, we were there to support you. You know, you're presenting our technology. You've wasted our time because this guy is wasting our time." Well, that wasn't the case. They're so close-minded, they just couldn't get out of that.
Yeah.
And I battled for many years, and that's probably why I changed what I did. Because rarely do you meet people who've got the same curiosity mindset. To get that to happen in a meeting is quite rare, I think. We say we want to do it, everyone says this, but as soon as you get into the battle of the performance, the theatre, loudest voice rings. Whoever's the loudest voice will take control. And if they're not a curious person, then I think you've got some problems. So that's really how it happens.
I always have this visualization. It's like everybody's sitting in suits of armor around the table, ready for the arrows. So they're all guarded, right?
Yeah, and I do think that's the case, yeah.
It is, very much, and especially as you get to the top of organizations, it's almost like the steps up through have hardened people.
Yeah.
And they've added more and more armor in order to get to the top. And it's a rare individual, and you can spot it a mile off, the individual that suddenly takes their armor off and becomes the real human again.
Yeah.
And it's so shocking when it happens that everybody sort of responds, right?
Well,
initially
people worry,
through confusion, exactly, through worry.
Well, people worry. They worry, and I've had this said to me. I worry about letting curiosity grow, because then people will lose track of what they're supposed to do. And I totally understand that. And if you walk into a room and say, "Look, guys, ask any question you like," but the agenda says sales figures, and we suddenly go all over the place. I can understand why people say, "No, I don't want it. I don't want it in my room." So I've often battled with people who just want to kind of do like smaller versions of it.
Yeah.
But it all comes down to trust. If we trust each other and we're open about that, then these things can happen I don't mean in a controlled way, but in a way that allows you to get what you want. And what you want is growth.
Yeah.
Change just for the sake of it, as you know, what's the point? I need to do growth. And if I'm not spending enough time asking the questions around what does growth look like and what does it feel like, then all I am going to get is change, and it's not necessarily the change we want. And we're surrounded by that.
Yeah.
In getting harder, and we haven't mentioned the AI word yet. I'm sure you're going to.
That's going to come, yeah.
But that's got to be the proof right now, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to what happened, obviously these guys just got fed up with the situation, left. Clearly, curiosity wasn't happening, but something happened in you in that moment then. So let's just sort of, where did that go from that point? what sort of happened next?
Well, it realised
was it an instant thing?
No.
I guess over time you sort of got over the as everybody would, of the disappointment of the moment.
Yeah, so it wasn't a sort of a eureka moment. I mean, it's lovely if it was, but it set a thread running, and I have to thank my wife, because she, I was probably moaning to her about this whole situation about my career, and I don't want to do that anymore, I want to do this. And she said, "Why don't you write a book about it?" And I think for me, especially then and now today, they are evidence for me, and only really for me, that I actually did change something.
Yeah.
That I can look back and say, my moment of curiosity, you can find it in my 2 books. I don't claim, as you know, to do anything great with my books. Thank you for being in one of them, by the way. But they're my evidence that my curiosity gene actually happened.
So let's just talk about the books for a minute then. Okay. So available, I think, on all normal...
Well, they're on Amazon. They're not on Waterstones.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Amazon's good enough.
Hopefully not on eBay. Hopefully everyone has sold theirs, yes. But
how do they get hold of them? What are they called, firstly?
Well, the first book is, even if it was free, imaginatively, the words that person said to me is the book.
Yeah.
And it's all about understanding outcome. And so that was the first book. And the second book, which you kindly put in, is The Forgotten Algorithm, which takes you back into the meeting space, which is, what are we forgetting to ask?
Yeah.
The curiosity question we should have asked, which we don't, and we leave the room because everyone else has asked the same questions. Who's going to be brave enough to say, there's a question I want to ask? And the algorithm means that we need to ask all of the 3 questions, which is, what does good look like? Yeah. What does it feel like? And what does it matter? What does it mean? And it's, I suppose in later life for me, it's what does good enough mean? It's a question we don't ask in business. And if we had, HS2, if we'd have wind the clock back and said, what does good enough look like to solve the problem? What was the problem in the first place? We might not have ended up with what we've got. Now, that's probably unkind, but that level of questioning, who's going to bring that into the room if everybody sounds and looks the same?
Yeah, I love that. And actually, that was one of the big takeaways that I really got a lot of benefit from the book is exactly that, the trade-offs. Because we never think of them as trade-offs, do we? We kind of assume, and I think it's partly down to the way humans are wired. We tend to be very binary.
We do.
We love black and white, but we hate that grey, messy middle stuff, right? I see this playing out a lot, and which is why, sadly, we're saying without getting too deep into politics. We see that politics that's divisive tends to get more attention. That is absolutely something we're seeing because it's simpler for us as humans, right, to have that.
We don't want to talk about it, you're right.
We don't want to talk about the messy, difficult stuff.
Yeah, because we're in a solution world. We're human beings, fight or flight.
Yeah.
See a problem, solve it. See a problem, solve it. Nothing has changed.
That's right.
And again, I love quotes, but there are no solutions, just trade-offs. You go into IKEA, you get trade-offs thrown at you. You have to build it yourself.
Yeah.
The trade-off is you've got to spend Saturday afternoon building your Billy bookcase. But they know that, you know that, and we're all good. And they've grown. But lots of other people hide the trade-offs, especially politicians. They hide the trade-offs, and they give you the idea that they can solve the problem, because that's what everyone expects politicians to say. The reality is just expose the trade-offs. Now, in our world, especially with technology people don't want to talk about trade-offs. And so they hide behind it. And that's why change is difficult, because then you never said that was going to happen.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that was going to happen. Why is it taking 6 months longer than you said it? And you know what that was like.
And it's interesting with the trade-offs, and I was it came to mind. There's lots of behavioural science research that's been done in this space, and there was the one, and I can't remember the cake mix. It was the American cake mix back in the 50s.
Aunt Bessie's.
That's it, Aunt Bessie's. Thank you. And they couldn't sell it. They couldn't sell it because it was too easy. You just basically get the mix, put it in a bowl, put it in the oven. Add some water, put it in the oven, done. Right. And it wasn't selling very well. And so somebody had the bright idea as maybe it was making it too easy, and therefore the ladies cooking it felt like frauds when they had their friends around or whatever. They didn't feel like they put any effort in. So they made it such that they took away the powdered egg, so you had to add an egg. And all of a sudden that made it feel like they were actually putting some effort in.
There you go.
And that extra little bit of effort meant that it felt more worthwhile. And going back to the IKEA example, and that's one of the key things with that, you get that sense that you've built it yourself, even though you've simply followed the instructions rather than it just turning up. And so that sense of pride that you have for this thing increases as a consequence.
Yeah.
And it's these little things that matter a lot, I think, and in business especially. You think about the satisfaction of doing something that was hard, something where you didn't know all the answers, something where you had to maybe take a few left and right turns along the way to get to a great outcome, and the sense of pride, collective pride that actually comes with that. And it's like, to your point, we get into this we have to solve problems, solve problems, and we go away feeling slightly empty as a consequence.
Well, we don't like taking things away. I think that's the other thing we have to add. We believe we have to add, when actually we get more from taking things away. The little thing that I often try with people is 3 questions before we get started doing anything, which is, you've got this idea to solve a problem.
Yeah.
What are you going to stop doing now? What is the one thing this will allow you to stop? Well, we'll stop using that old system. Okay, that's a good start. And what will allow you to start doing? Well, we'll start to use this new system. Okay, that's inevitable. What's the one thing that you're going to do better? And usually people struggle because they'll go, oh, the new system is bound to be faster, smarter. Yeah, but are you going to be able to deal with that yourself?
Yeah.
And that's the cognitive side of the curiosity that I've got to. Asking those vulnerable questions and not being too surprised with the answers, and not trying to pigeonhole answers too quickly. AI, for example, is a wonderful example of, where's the trade-off with AI? The trade-off is, you could be, well, I don't need to worry about it. AI will write me in my board paper, write me in my slides and my emails. But the curiosity gene for some people will be, I still need to have a look at it.
Yeah.
I still need to work on it. I still need to develop it myself, which is the IKEA moment again.
That's right.
However, there's a lot of other people who say, AI's written it, move on. And there's the risk, isn't it? Yeah. Especially in change, because you really are then having the problem that you don't get what you thought you were going to get.
Yeah. My experience with it is very much that it's the back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's where the value is, where you learn from it, it learns from you.
Totally right.
And you get to something, then it's a bit like sort of whittling down, something to like carving a beautiful thing. That process you go through, constant back and forth, that gets you to a good outcome.
But it's so cognitive, and it's all cognitive, and that's my going back to my moments. I probably wasn't a cognitive person at that time.
Yeah.
I met one for the first time who was senior enough to say no. And I think that was the moment. This guy is saying no. What are we doing wrong? I need to understand why he said no and move on. Whereas I think my colleagues went, we'll move on to the next one.
We'll find one who says yes.
We'll find one who says yes. Yes. There you go.
The easier answer.
That's it. They ring a bell and you do the next one. And I understand that. So my career after that point was working still in those organizations who were looking for the next one. But I suppose my hobby was to continually find curious people like yourself, to build a network of people who are curious, which I think I've done. The books are examples of that. And slowly pull away from what I had before. And I've got to this point now, I'm totally non-technical. I'm totally not into, the first problem. I'm totally into what is the real problem going on here, and asking deeper questions. None of this is rocket science from what I'm saying, but it's what's good enough for me.
Yeah. It's just going those few levels deeper, isn't it? Or as one coach said to me, the thing behind the thing.
Yeah.
It's that it's being prepared to sort of, as you said, get curious. So how are your clients, the guys you're working with at the minute, how are they responding to that, would you say? I mean, I guess you've got a fairly mixed...
It's very random. I mean, I must admit, and I'm kind of, truthfully, I was probably a little bit surprised. I thought, I leave corporate life and work always look the same, but it's totally not that at all. And I'm okay with that now. So it's very random, the kind of work I'm doing. Feedback, I think people like this. They like the disruptive moments. I think I told you of things where I've walked in and said, you've achieved this, and now it's the day after, and it's failed. Why has it failed? And when you ask that kind of question, especially around change management, that kind of premortem question, it's fascinating. And I did this once where when we asked that question, the senior stakeholder said, we don't have enough skills. And that's at the heart of my second book.
Just to play that back so whoever's watching can catch up with this, I think what I heard is you do exactly the prediction, essentially. So imagine for a moment, this project that everybody's excited about, that we're going to deliver, it's going live in August. We get to August and it's failed. What's the reason for the failure? Is that essentially
absolutely it? Got it. And it's a great test, because we do it in your own life, don't we? I'm planning a decorating my bedroom. It's the day after.
Yeah.
What are the chances of me getting it to look like I thought it would? Well, I'm not really a good painter. Well, yeah, okay, get someone in.
Yeah.
And on a scale of some of the programs that we're working on, or you've worked on, it's very complex.
Yeah.
So to stress people, and I use the word stress in a positive way, to get them to sit back and go, honestly, I don't think I can deliver that. Okay, so we need to think about that, because we're going to fail.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful human exercise. It really exposes people, the vulnerabilities. You do need leaders to sit back and go, look, I'll take it. I don't mind. I'd rather have it now than later. Let's understand it. And in the example I use in my book, we realised that we'd overcomplicated, we'd added too much, and all they needed to do was understand the trade-offs a bit better and take things out. And they took things out of their programme bit by bit, and they started to move forward. And and that's the fault of the consultants who come in and say, you could do this as well, and you could do this as well. And we have this in our lives, don't we?
We do.
Where people say, I can offer you more, and I can offer you more, and we think, okay, we can have all of these things, but we don't need them all, but we've taken them because everyone else is doing the same thing. And FOMO, fear of missing out, is a killer, because if you're in a competitive business landscape where company A has implemented ERP or something, we better do it as well, because they're our competitor, so we better do it. And then you're on a race, but you both could be failing, but in a way it doesn't matter, because as long as you're both doing the same thing, that's crazy. So those people who want to take a moment to say, no, let's just have a look at this and work our way through, using things like the premortem as a real tactical thing to do, I think is curiosity, which is what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And the temptation, the opposite of that essentially is, I always think about the lemming analogy. Everybody sort of follows the same method. Because every other company does it, we're going to do it. And then what you don't see is that if you look far enough ahead, those lemmings are disappearing off a cliff. And you see, that the certainly big projects and programs in organizations, we've seen the statistics, everything from 70 to 90% failure rates. And, a good proportion of them, even though not defined as outright failures, are, let's say, well short of expected outcomes.
But there's got to be, and I think, to your point, there's got to be another way. At some point, there's a moment in one of these programs. We have a problem. We've identified the problem. We're now going to resolve the problem. At some point, there's a moment when a question doesn't get asked.
That's right.
Or it does get asked and it gets dismissed. And it's that moment, if you're lucky enough to be in the room at that moment, you might be able to do something about it. So it's giving people the time at the start, before they get too far into it, to actually ask the hard questions like, are we doing too much here?
Yeah.
Would we be in trouble if we only did this much?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about.
And a couple of times here we've kind of touched on how safe people feel to raise this kind of thing, to raise the difficult questions, to have the difficult conversations. And that's, for me, one of the biggest, most telling aspects or visuals, I suppose, of a team, is the extent to which you see people prepared to really call it.
Yeah.
You know, it's that, the analogy I always use is the classic, we're green until all of a sudden we go red. And hang on, what happened to amber? Amber didn't happen. We just went straight from green to red.
We
didn't. In reality, we didn't. That has been trending amber for some time, or trending red for some time, but nobody wanted to call it. Nobody felt safe enough to call it, because the next question is, so what are you going to do about it? And they therefore feel the pressure. We see this playing out time and time again, unfortunately, and to your point, underneath all of that is what we call psychological safety, is that willingness to put yourself out, to speak up.
Well, what is it?
That doesn't happen.
What is it? And I'm probably going to go all over the place with this, but there's a Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, the measure becomes ineffective or becomes weakened.
Yeah.
So again, we're very good at giving ourselves targets. Health, personal lives, business, targets all the time. And we drive that way because we need to measure how we get on. I totally understand that. But that can't be just it. Because if it's just it, we could be a lemming.
Yeah.
I've hit my target, boss, but I've actually just collapsed over the cliff.
Yeah. There's a rather unfortunate NHS saying, operation successful, patient dead.
Yeah.
And it's something that's, kind of points very clearly to what we see on a regular basis is, we've executed perfectly, outcome missed completely.
I noticed something yesterday in the Parliament thing. There was something coming up, and not with the stories, so that you probably don't want it on your podcast, but someone holds up a piece of paper and there's red, amber, green. And I sat there thinking, yeah, that makes sense you'd do that, because it's absolute red, amber, green. But the actual problem that you're trying to talk about is so human, so smacks of vulnerability, but nobody wants to hear that. They want to know, was it in red, amber, or green? And so we conveniently put them into those buckets because that's what we expect to see.
Yep.
When the curious question is, we don't need to do any of that. And that takes some courage and some trust in yourselves and the people you're working with.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Paul. So just to, if you like, bring it all the way back to the beginning, if there were one or two key takeaways, if you like, for people watching this, something that they could learn from, maybe they're having that moment of following a plan blindly and not asking the difficult questions. And in that bit before you got to the what if it were free moment, what would you advise them?
Well, there's a big leap of hindsight here, of course, but I think one of it would be, what question should I have asked that I haven't asked? And I would recommend you write it down, as opposed to just think it. Physically write it down, because the process of actually writing that down slows your brain down for a start, and starts you break it up into, well, I've asked all the questions. I've asked all the questions that Marx asks, or I've asked all the questions that AI has told me to ask. No, think about what's the question you should have asked that you haven't asked. And that means you have to be in the shoes of the other person.
Yes.
So me talking to you now, you talking to me, I'm thinking what question Mark hasn't asked me. That curiosity, because if you could do that and play around with it, you will probably find out the question you should have asked. And that might just be everything. That might be everything for someone to say, that's not my problem. Really, that's not my problem. I know it says it here, but that's not my problem. This is my problem. Oh, okay. That's what we need to focus on. And that's it for me. I think we've all got it. We're all born with curiosity as a baby. And it gets removed from us as we go through school and university. It gets stripped away because we have to conform. It may come back in later life, or you may have lost it, who knows. So remembering to keep it alive could be the biggest
That's so true, isn't it?
thing.
We get it knocked out of us as kids, don't we?
We do.
And I love the prompt, by the way, because it just suddenly made me realise there probably is a question I need to ask you, which is, what haven't we discussed that we should have in this conversation?
Well, I think we've only mentioned AI twice, which is probably quite good, because I think it's part of the answer for sure. But if it's too far at the beginning, the risks occur. Yeah. If we say, I need to build a railway line from Birmingham to London, AI, tell me what I need to do, the chances are we get what we've got.
We will execute brilliantly, yeah.
What we need before we ask AI is two human beings to start talking to each other. Then use AI to say, how can I do this more efficiently, save more money? Absolutely makes sense to me. But when AI sits around the table too soon, then I think we've got some problems. So it's having the courage to say, two human beings talk about the problem first.
Yeah.
Get it going, ask the questions, be vulnerable, be curious, and then say to AI, what do you think of that? Not the cart before the horse sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of a conversation I heard about the Channel Tunnel when they were shortening the journey time. And I'm gonna get this wrong, but let's say they shortened it by 30 minutes, and they spent however many millions of pounds doing it. And the challenge that I heard was, so what if they just, instead of doing all of that, spending all that money, spend a little bit more money on really, really good Wi-Fi, super fast Wi-Fi, and give people free champagne for the whole journey.
Absolutely.
That would have cost a huge amount less,
Yeah.
and just make the journey more pleasurable.
But then in fairness to the people, I do think you're right, but that doesn't look good. So it doesn't look as good as.
That's right.
You know, because they're looking, we need an absolute answer to our problem, especially politicians. They need to show they've fixed it.
That's right.
That's what wins votes. And maybe in the future we'll get politicians to say, no, do you know what, you'll get a free glass of champagne and a Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And that might be good enough.
That's
because,
right.
do you know, maybe they haven't asked enough questions of us, what we want. They've assumed, and that takes us into, well, because Mark likes it, and everyone looks like Mark, and everyone sounds like Mark, and then we'll do that. And that brings into diversity and all of the other aspects of human life that we don't really want to talk about in business because we like to categorize people because it makes it easier for us. And that's okay until it isn't.
Yeah, again, reduces cognitive load.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that's fantastic.
So you did ask the question that
yes.
we should have asked.
Thank you. No, that's been fantastic. Thank you very much, Paul.
No, thank you, Mark.
Appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers, good luck.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. You'll find more like that interview with more very interesting people. So if you head over to the channel and subscribe, and there will be plenty more to come. Thank you.